Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Can anyone confirm?
I can hear you, Abdullah.
Thanks, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this online talk on distorting the past, NCERT, Hindutva, and the battle for Indian history. We welcome you to this online talk by CERT. I would briefly like to introduce you about CERT. CERT stands for Center for Education and Research Training. It was established in February 2017 as a resource and guidance for Center for Students and Researchers. See, we are committed to promote and conduct research programs in the field of education. CIT engage in academic realms with innovation approach to reform educational policies. We have been publishing works also. We have dozens of works ranging from books to research papers and policy briefing. And we have done quite a few of sessions on summits also, particularly our history summit recently on the Northeast History Summit is one of its kind. Uh, Today we have Dr. Ruchika Sharma with us. I would like to introduce to you about Dr. Ruchika Sharma. Dr. Ruchika Sharma is alumni of Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has obtained her PhD from the Center of Historical Studies from Jawaharlal Nehru Universities. She is quite famous amongst youngsters for her YouTube channel, and in particularly the Eyeshadow and Itihas podcast. Her expertise lies in medieval histories, and apart from that, she she has both her grandparents from partition who migrated to India. So she has a childhood interest in history. Uh, Dr. Ruchika Sharma has been quite a vocal voice amongst us. She has been on news channels uh, talking against this all issue of NCERT books and all. Mhm. And she has been on media trial for that also. We show solidarity with her on that also. Uh, so today she will be talking on this. This session will be around for the talk will be around 30 to 35 minutes, and after that we will be having a Q&A session. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Abdullah, for such a interesting introduction. I think you must have gone through a couple of my interviews to know that my grandparents were partition migrants. And yes, they are probably the first reason why I got interested in history, because they would tell me stories about partition. Okay, so how I've structured the talk is that I'm first going to list out my problems with NCERT, class 8th textbook on history, and then I'm going to try and reason why the NCERT did what it did with the class 8th textbook. Before I start, thank you so much for CERT for giving me this opportunity and inviting me for a talk where I could just put all of my thoughts together on this particular issue and speak to all of you. All right. So my first problem, and I think a lot of this has already been said by me in the interviews that I have been going to, in the panel discussions, in the debates, etc. My biggest problem with the NCERT is that it's riddled with factual inaccuracies, the class 8th textbook. I am yet to do a very detailed analysis of the entire book, but from the preliminary reports that I've seen in the Indian Express, the Hindu, etc., I've been able to glean firstly that they've really misrepresented the history of jizya. First of all, this idea that jizya was somehow a tool for conversion is completely a misrepresented figment of imagination. I think NCERT is perhaps reading many medieval Islamic literature literally to come to this conclusion. Because if you look at how the jizya was actually imposed throughout medieval India, there is nowhere even a single iota of this idea that somehow we are imposing this so that people could convert. Even when it was first put to practical use in 634 AD by Caliph Omar in Iraq, Iran, and Levant, where the non-Muslim population of these three areas were subject to jizya, there also conversion, for example, was a very difficult thing. You couldn't just convert by say, oh, I don't want to pay the jizya, so can I just convert to Islam? In fact, conversion at that point in time was very difficult. Marshall Hodge, etc., have written about this, and they say that if you wanted to if somebody wanted to convert to Islam at that point of time, they had to first get in touch with an Arab, a Muslim Arab, and then be taken by that Arab as a mawali, which means a client. And then that client would be taught, the basic teachings of Islam, and only then could he convert. So there is no such idea that somehow conversion was a very easy process and that jizya was an incentive to convert, etc. That is completely unfounded, right? So where is NCERT getting this information from? Which practical source has ever documented that there were these five people who came to us in Sultanate period or in Mughal India who said, "Sir, we don't want to pay jizya, so could we just convert to Islam instead?" So I don't think that that has ever happened. And also, this deliberate misrepresentation of when Akbar first repeals the jizya is also very sad. He never first repeals the jizya in his later years. He first repeals the jizya just 3 years after he comes to the throne. I think a lot of people are very confused, or maybe even NCERT is confused, and if it is, it's very shocking that Akbar's reign starts from 1556 onwards. That's actually not true, because from 1556 to 1560, he was still under the regency of his guardian, Bairam Khan. And from 1560 onwards is when he becomes the emperor proper. And within 3 years, it's one of his first decisions that he takes as an emperor is to repeal the jizya as well as the pilgrimage tax, the Hajj tax. Both of them are stopped. And the reason given for it in the Ain-e-Akbar is that both of them are regarded by the emperor as discriminatory taxes. So again, NCERT is completely misrepresenting this history of the jizya, and one wonders why. They also go ahead and sort of downplay this thing, which I think Iqtidar Alam Khan in his paper is very astutely observed as to how, starting with Akbar, there is a steady rise of non-Muslim population as mansabdars, in the mansabdari system. And I think that's a very interesting observation. That has also been misrepresented in the NCERT, somehow this idea that, oh, well, Hindus were in a minority. Well, I think what the NCERT is not able to look at is the context in which the non-Muslim population is entering the Mughal service. And for that time, it's actually pretty high, right? So 16%, I think, under Akbar is the Rajputs, and I think around 22% is the total non-Muslim population. And then the Rajput percentage increases to 33% under the under Aurangzeb's reign, right? So there is this deliberate idea that we are going to create this idea that somehow everything that so far has been regarded as, say, a paragon of Akbar's cosmopolitanism will be deliberately attacked by the NCERT. They bring out in his 45 years of reign just one particular incident of the siege of Chittor, and say that, this is what has made him very brutal. So I think that clearly shows that NCERT is trying too hard to portray even somebody like Akbar, who's even the popular sphere regarded as a very cosmopolitan ruler, that, even he was so brutal. That's how brutal the Mughals were. I think that's very interesting to see that the NCERT is doing that. Apart from the factual inaccuracies, the NCERT goes all out to also remove the history of two very fascinating women in medieval India. They've completely removed Razia, Sultan Razia, and Noor Jahan. Now, I don't know why they have done that. And it's very sad because you see, as a student a school student of history, when you're looking at history and you see a host of male emperors, it's really nice and refreshing to find that, well, there were a couple of odd female emperors as well. One of which is, of course, Sultan Razia, who was an emperor in her, a sultan in her own right. She ruled from 1236 to 1240. She has so many achievements in her name. She diplomatically warded off a Mongol invasion. She minted coins in her name. Her former title being Sultan Razia wa Dola wa Din. And then she even started, so in the first couple of years of her reign, she was ruling behind a screen so as to not show her face to everybody. But then she even removes that and she removes her parda. She wears the clothes that the Sultan would have worn, the kuba and the kula. And she goes out, rides the elephant, etc., conducts her business. She also tries to very diplomatically outmaneuver the many machinations against her, plotted and hatched by the Turkish Bandagan, who was an all-male coterie of these very powerful nobles, which were actually inculcated by her own father, Sultan al-Tutmish. But Razia somehow tries to keep them at bay for as long as she can. So I think all of this actually deserves a lot of space in the NCERT, because I think for female students reading this will be such an inspiring read. But somehow they have decided to completely remove Sultan Razia. Um, Another very interesting way to look at Razia perhaps could have been that, even though she had so much to her name and so many achievements to her name, for example, Juzjani, the contemporary chronicler of Sultan Razia, in his Tabaqat-e Nasiri, calls her Sultan Razia Lashkarkash, which means a war leader, somebody who leads her army into war. Um, Later on, of course, the later sources depict her in a very negative light and judge her through very patriarchal lens. So it would have been very interesting for the NCERT to probably bring out as to why, she was being looked at through such a patriarchal lens and not for her achievements, so on and so forth. This could have been a very interesting case study in how women's histories, when they are written by men, are written very significantly differently than what the woman's history actually is. But I think NCERT has completely lost that opportunity and completely removed Sultan Razia. They've also removed Noor Jahan, who was again a very fascinating person. She was the de facto emperor of the Mughal Empire from 1621 to 1627, when Jahangir was very ill. Um, she was an excellent hunt. She was an excellent hunter. She was somebody who, is said to have innovated a lot of sartorial innovations, like the silver brocade, which is the badla, silver lace, which is kinari. She is said to have innovated dudami, which is this lady's gown. Also the panchtolia, which was this lighter version of the orini. And then she was an excellent poetess as well. She was somebody who also had, her name on the coin next to that of the emperor. And then she also controlled the Muhuruzuk, the royal stamp of the Mughals, and passed a lot of the farmans, right? So I think to remove, such powerful women who wielded power, Noor Jahan had so much money at her disposal, and the way she used it to build sarais, etc. All of this would have made for a very interesting, refreshing read. Anyway, women in Indian history or histories anyway are so few and far between, especially models of powerful women. To remove them is complete injustice to the history of women. And I have no idea why NCERT has gone and done that. I think my only reason seems to be that in NCERT's mind, powerful women could have not existed in the paragon in the paradigm of these Muslim rulers and the Muslim period, quote unquote. So therefore, they have sort of removed these two exceptions. so that they could just prove to us that, the Mughals were actually very bad and they treated women badly, this, that, and the other. There were no empowered women. So I think it's very sad. I don't know if they've also included other very fascinating women like Chand Bibi, etc., in the decade. But to remove these fascinating examples of women who are wielding power and a very refreshing interregnum of this female polity that comes across. It's kind of sad that NCERT has sort of removed that as well. Another thing that I have a problem with is this value judgment that the NCERT tries to put when it comes to only the class 8 textbook. This, use of the words like brutal and cruel willy-nilly without actually defining what brutality means and what cruelty means, and without using it for any other ruler. It's very fascinating that they have not used the same words to describe, say, a Chola ruler like Rajendra Chola, who, fights against the Chalukya ruler, burns his capital called Manekheta. His inscription says so many women and children died. So many women and children were kidnapped before the city was burned. But somehow he is not brutal. But Akbar is brutal, Babur is brutal, Aurangzeb is brutal, and they're all cruel. But no other ruler, no other non-Muslim ruler has been described as brutal and cruel. So it's, you don't have to actually look much further to see what NCERT is trying to do and what its agenda is. So I think that's very fascinating that they've sort of decided to use words like this. It also sort of reeks of a lack of objectivity, because if you are trying to create a textbook for students, you want to be as objective as possible and stay away from as many value judgments as possible. You don't want to use words like brutal and cruel. These are conclusions that students should be able to, if they want to, or if they have to come to this conclusion, they can do so by themselves. You don't have to actually use these terms again and again and again. So it's very clear that the NCERT has a preconceived notion of the Mughal rulers as being brutal and cruel, and they want students to know this. And therefore, they've just sort of peppered these words all around, the class 8 textbook where they discuss um, the Mughals and their brutality. None of the other rulers have their quote unquote brutality discussed. In fact, I think there's a very fascinating HT report which says that they have removed this entire campaign of the Marathas from 1741 to 1751 against Bengal, which was marked by a lot of brutality, a lot of overtaxation. There are even Bengali poems written about it, Chele Ghumalo, Parajolaro, Borgialo Deshe, Bulbulite Dhan Khaiche Khajna Debu Kishe, which basically talks about how the Borgi have come when everybody has sort of slept and they're all silent. And, they are overtaxing us, but the bird has eaten, the grain. So how are we going to pay the taxes? So none of this brutality finds itself. And the HT reporter, very kudos to him, he asked that person, the person who's, by the way, I will speak about him, the person who's the social science curricular head of the NCERT, Michael Danino, a very interesting figure. I'll talk about him later. When he was asked as to why you've removed this particular bit of Maratha brutality, they said that they don't want to overburden the students. So it's fascinating that Akbar's siege of Chittor and the details, the gory details that the NCERT gives about it, is not going to overburden the student. But 10 years of Maratha brutality against the Bengalis is certainly going to overburden students. So we're going to remove that. So I think there's no longer a pretense left of the NCERT. NCERT at one point of time was at least pretending that they are trying to be objective and they're trying to, restructure this with some semblance of objectivity in mind. That I think has completely gone out of the window. The NCERT is very clear about this, that they have an agenda and they're putting this across. And then, these double standards, like I was saying, that the Chola brutality has not been mentioned. Ashok, in his, the Mauryan Emperor Ashok, in his Kalsi Rock Edict 13, I think, talks about how 1.5 lakh people were displaced in the War of Kalinga by Ashok's army, and around 1 lakh people were killed, but nobody has, the NCERT textbook, which talks about Ashok, does not call him a cruel ruler. The Cholas, when they attack Mahinda fifth of Ceylon, they go ahead and after massacring a lot of his own royal family, uh, try and loot a lot of the women and the women and the concubines which were associated with Mahinda the Fifth. None of this is regarded as brutal. In fact, you won't even find it mentioned. In fact, I am saying this, and this is probably the first time many people are hearing about the fact that Chola brutality also exists. I don't think NCERT books even previously have ever mentioned about Chola brutality. So there is no idea of regarding non-Muslim rulers as brutal. So there is a very clear double standards that only and only will kids read about brutality vis-a-vis the Mughals, and nothing else. So that kids go home thinking that only Muslim rulers were brutal, which I think is very, very dangerous. And then, of course, temple destruction, which, I've been speaking about it, has a very long history in India. Starting with the demolition, the conversion of the Buddhist viharas. You have Pushyamitra Shunga, you have Mihirakula, the Hona ruler. You have Jain temples. So you have Arikesari Maravarman, the 7th century ruler, who is said to have demolished a lot of Jain temples and killed around, I think, 900 Jains as well. And then you have this entire movement in the 12th, 13th century where when the Veer Shaivite movement is coming in, where proper Jain shrines, Jain shrines which are still alive, and they have people who are going there over there and worshipping, their gods, etc. Those shrines were captured. Parts of it were modified to make it into a Shiva shrine. Parts of it were broken. They have a Nandi that has been put outside. One example is that of the Megudi temple in Hallur, Karnataka, where they have uprooted the idol of the Jinnah Parsanatha, and smeared it with Veer Shaivite Bhubut and kept it in the central aisle so that everybody can see that this particular religion has been conquered by another religion, which is the Veer Shaiva. And then in its place in the sanctum sanctorum, in the Garbhagriha, they have made a Shivling, right? And in front of the temple, they have a Nandi installed. And this is something that I think a lot of the people miss in the larger scheme of things, because temple to temple conversions is not very easy to find out, because the temple looks and feels the same, right? There are only very minor changes, etc., which are done, especially to the Garbhagriha or the Sanctum Sanctorum, where the main idol must be replaced. And then, of course, you have rulers wantonly, just destroying temples. So you have King Harsha of Kashmir. Kalhan's Rashtarangini says he broke all temples except two. You have Shankar Varman overtaxing temples, taking away their lands, looting 64 temples. You have Shemagupt, who burnt an entire monastery called the Jayendra Vihar. You have the Ghodavadeshwar caves in the 6th century, which are clearly Buddhist caves, because there are inscriptions to that effect over there, which was converted. Half of it was converted into a Vaishnav shrine, and half of it is converted into a Shaiva shrine. These are, of course, close to Pandharpur, I think, in Maharashtra. So all of this creates a very rich perspective of temple destruction in Indian history, and gives you a lot of reasons as to why temples were destroyed. This political, this financial, this, that, and the other. But NCERT has completely ignored all of that and only discussed temple destruction with regards to the sultans and the Mughals, again, deliberately trying to create this idea in the minds of the students that only and only were Muslim rulers breaking temples and making mosques out of it. No other ruler was doing that, which is absolutely incorrect, right? Because there were so many other rulers doing that for a host of reasons, right? So that's another problem that I have. Now, why is this happening? Why is the NCERT doing this? One straight answer is, of course, this 2022 report, I think it came out in the Quint, which says that at least 24 members who are part of this restructuring, quote unquote, committee of the NCERT, 24 of these have direct affiliation with the RSS. So I think it removes all doubt as to who they are working for. But equally interesting a figure is Mr. Michael Danino, who, by the way, has no qualifications in history. He's not a historian. I don't think he has a qualification in any of the social science subjects, right? And he is the social science curricular head of the NCERT. Now, this man is a writer. He's a French writer. I think he teaches at IIT-K. Not sure what subject he teaches, but he has written a book very fascinatingly, which talks about, which links the Saraswati River, which is mentioned in the Vedas, with the lost channel of the Ghaggar Hakra, right? And says that this is Saraswati. Now, how he has come to that conclusion? Many historians have actually raised red flags on his methodology, saying that, this is not correct. One such historian is an American historian called Peter Hees, who's written a very good review of the book and said that, that this person firstly doesn't have the linguistic capability to actually go ahead and make such a conclusion, because he can't really read the Vedas in the language that they are written in. Vedic Sanskrit is anyway a lot more difficult than just Sanskrit. So, that's one. And another is, of course, that there are many historians who have regularly accused Michael Danino of having Hindutva leanings and producing scholarship which is very pro-Hindutva, right? So I think one particular paper came out in Modern South Asia, I think that's the journal's name, called by the historian Sudeshna Guha, who very emphatically proclaimed that, Michael Danino is actually doing Hindutva's bidding. And this is also the reason why I think he's been put as the head of the social science curricula. But it's also very fascinating that for the NCERT, no longer is expertise in a subject required. You can actually make the social science curricular head as just anybody who agrees with the ideology. It doesn't matter whether he has expertise in social science subjects or not, right? So also, I think why NCERT is doing this is because it's very clear that the NCERT is now more driven by ideology than any modicum of objectivity. It's very clear. All these examples actually show they have a very preset notion in their mind, which says that the Muslim rulers are bad. It's almost like watching a WhatsApp forward transform itself into a textbook. And that's very, very dangerous. The communalization that it's feeding to very young kids, these are like 13, 14-year-olds, right? They are going to go home thinking, oh, well, Muslim rulers were bad. They were brutal. They broke temples. They are the only ones who, by the way, massacred so many Hindus. They are bringing out taxes that force conversions, this, that, and the other. Again, none of this is borne by evidence. Forced conversion myth was debunked by Irfan Habib and many of the other, astute scholars of history, because there is just, where is the data? Harbans Mukhia in his book has written about how when Monsieur Eber comes to, I think this is 19th century, when he comes to India, he finds that the Muslim population is around 16%, right? But in the 20th century, when the English do their census, right, you find that the population is increased to 25%, the Muslim population. So the biggest jump actually happens during the English time, not really when it comes to the Mughals. And in fact, the Mughals and the Sultans are not really interested in, trying to convert. Most of the conversions are actually happening, if they are happening, by the Sufi saints, right? And these are people who have the edge because they are talking in the local language. This is the same when the Christian missionaries come in, right? When you communicate in the local language, people will understand more. So the Sufi saint who's going to Dakkan, he is producing Chakinama, Charkhanama that Richard Eden talks about, right? These are, again, completely in Dakhani. They're not really in Farsi, which is the language of the court of the Mughals, or which is the language of the court of the Sultans. None of this, is basically in languages which are arcane to most of the people. These are languages which people can understand. And therefore, it's easier for the Sufi saints to actually reach out to more people. And therefore, a lot of people get converted. And these are also Sufi saints that, even if you weren't converted to their religion, you could still go ahead and, go to a Pir Baba's mazar and worship them and, ask for some sort of blessing in return, so on and so forth. This is a very common tradition that has been there throughout. Even today, I think many people go to Nizamuddin Aulia's mazar. They have nothing to do with Islam per se. They just believe that the, saint has some power. So I think when you look at the idea of forced conversion, again, there is no data, there is no statistics. Two of the places, Bengal and Kerala, which has the most Muslim population, were places which the Mughal Empire was actually very weak in. Mughal Empire did not have a big stronghold in Kerala, neither did the Sultans, nor in Bengal, right? So where is Islam coming in these places? Because of the Sufi sense. So the Mughal rulers and the sultans are not interested in, trying to convert whatever, this, that, and the other. I also think the NCERT has deliberately tried to hide and remove the contribution of the Mughals to the culture today. Because in the NCERT's mind, there's very clear idea that these are brutal invaders and they've given us nothing to the society, nothing to the Indian society today, which is absolutely incorrect. So Hindi, the language comes during the Mughal times. Shah Alam II would have probably spoken very similar Hindi that we speak today. Then you have, the clothes that we wear. You have the kurta, you have the choli, you have, these different styles of these ladies' gown, that women wear, the churidar, right? These very light dupattas, which are very similar to the panchtolia that I think Noor Jahan brought. And like I was saying, the kinari, the badla, and all of these were all innovated during the Mughal times. These were all popularized during the Mughal times. The kurta pajama combo was popularized so much during the Mughal times, right? So I think there is a deliberate attempt to downplay all of that as well, so that there is a caricature of the Mughals who were from outside, even though I think from Akbar all the way to Aurangzeb, everybody was born here. And after that also, so even Farrukh Siyar and all of these people who were born here. So I think there is this deliberate idea that these are people who are from outside, who were brutal, who were temple destroyers. And this is the image that they want to present to the kids. Right. And this ties in with NCERT's other changes if you look at class 11th and class 12th, where again there is this deliberate idea to remove, for example, they have removed the title of, Akbar the Great or whatever. They've removed that title. And while I'm actually very happy about it, because I don't think any ruler should be, hailed as great or whatever. I think all rulers should be just, called king or emperor or whatever. But it's fascinating that, they would retain Ashoka the Great, but they would remove Akbar the Great. So I think that's very fascinating that it's with the Muslim ruler that the greatness has been taken away, but not with the non-Muslim ruler. So that is, I think, a very fascinating thing. But also, another thing which is happening, which we don't talk much about, is that a lot of the caste realities are also being hidden. And this becomes very clear in class 11th and 12th textbooks. So, for example, there is this fascinating freedom fighter, Birsa Munda, who fought against the English, but he also fought against the Hindu landlords. Right? Now, the previous NCERT said this, that he was a person who fought against the English and the Hindu landlords. The NCERT now has removed Hindu landlords, right? So there is somehow this idea that he's only fighting the English. And of course, why would he ever want to fight the Hindus? Hindus are such amazing people. So caste realities are constantly downplayed. Class 6 textbook, I think the word caste reality has been changed into social realities. And then, of course, this absolutely hilarious idea that class 12th textbook has, that Aryan migration is just a theory, even though, now it's a completely established fact. We have genetic studies in 2019 in Cell and Science. Anybody who has any doubt, please go read the paper themselves. Don't read what the authors are saying in the media, because they're deliberately misrepresenting the paper. Don't read the media reports because they're deliberate misrepresentation. Read the paper. The paper is very clear about the findings. There is no doubt about it, right? Um, But before that, also, we had plenty of linguistic evidence and we had plenty of historical evidence. There is so much written about this. So Aryan migration is now a fact. However, NCERT will tell you, class 12th NCERT, that Aryan migration is just a theory. And then there is another theory which says that the Aryans were native to India. And they say that studies have been done to this effect. Now, which study is that? The NCERT doesn't tell us because, well, there is no study like that. So it's very fascinating to see how NCERT is basically, almost like making a primer from the WhatsApp forwards, which say, no, we were always from here, and it's the Muslim rulers which were from outside, which anyway is incorrect. Firstly, of course, the Aryans from 1500 BC start coming here. There's a waves of migration that happened. Then, of course, you have the Kushanas that come here. You have the Shakas that come here. You have so many rulers that have come from, quote unquote, outside the current boundaries of what is called as India today, right? Anyway, this boundary means nothing, for Indian history. This boundary means whatever it means to the nation today. But in Indian history, this boundary is very porous, right? So Pakistan is part of it. Afghanistan is part of it. Nepal, culturally has been part of it. Bangladesh has been part of it, right? There were cultural exchanges with Myanmar, with the Sri Vijaya kingdom, right? So what exactly does today's territory mean in the historical context is very fuzzy. So anyway, judging that, putting today's territory onto historical context is anyway very ahistorical. But NCERT has decided to do that and therefore declare only the Mughals and the Sultans as outsiders, and everyone else has somehow been, from here, simply because they are born here, which again is an irony because, well, so many Mughal rulers were also born here. So I think it's very clear that the NCERT is deliberately trying to create an idea where only Muslim rulers are bad. It's a world where only Muslim rulers are bad and everyone else is good. This reminds me of the kind of tropes that the English would use, right, in their historiography, in their colonial historiography. And it also kind of makes sense because the RSS was born at a time when colonial historiography is being written, is being created. The colonial historiography is very clear that the Muslim rulers were unnecessarily and exceptionally barbaric, right? So they create this trope of the Muslim other. And the Hindu rulers over here were very naive, very innocent. They didn't have a lot of power. And the Muslims were therefore able to capture these people, right? Now, this is a very shoddy, very superficial understanding of history and was deliberately created by the English so that they could, create dissensions in the society, use it as a communal trope. It's very sad to see that that same trope has now been brought back into the NCERT textbooks with the same aim in mind. The aim is again the same, just like the English, the aim somehow is to deepen the communal dissensions already in the society, right? Um, which is why, for example, it's fascinating how they are so keen on showing to the students of class 8 that Mughals were doing so much violence. But violence with regards to, say, rioting. So, for example, partition violence has been removed from class 11, class 12 textbooks. Babri Masjid demolition and the violence that followed that has been removed. Godhra violence has been removed. So, they've removed all these very fascinating bits of history, which are very sensitive topics. They should be taught in a classroom because classroom is a safe place where you can actually teach students about such sensitive topics with a sensitive teacher who can, encourage the students to find out reasons as to why these riots happen so that they don't happen again, right? But somehow they've been completely removed. The reason that this person called Dinesh Saklani, who's I think again some head of the NCERT, has said that we want to bring up positive citizens. We don't want to, give them any negativity. But somehow that does not apply for the class 8 textbook. Class 8 textbook will show all violence of the Mughals and the Sultans and all sorts of quote unquote negativity. But we are not going to show that when it comes to class 11th and class 12th textbook because there they should become positive citizens. So the double standards are very clear. But also this idea that somehow if we are going to withhold information from students, information as important as this. So for example, this entire movement, this entire chapter on social movements has been removed. It had the Chipko movement, it had the Narmada Bachao Andolan, very concrete issues. It would teach the students how to raise voice against the state, how democracy is actually made useful, how it is your democratic right to protest against the state, all of that has been removed. So I think when they say positive citizens, they mean citizens who or students who don't have, their own mind to think critically about things that they read. They are given everything on a platter with preconceived notions, with value judgments such as brutal, cruel, etc., laced onto it, you know, and they are supposed to mug it up, produce it in an exam, go home thinking only the Muslim rulers were bad, and further the communal agenda that has been going on for the past, 10, 11 years in the country right now. And I think that's my biggest worry, is that this is being fed to very, very young students who are going to, and they are going to sort of relate, right? They are going to relate because this is not happening just with the NCERT. It's a multi-pronged approach. It is also then happening in the colleges. So even if the student goes to the colleges, the college system, the state universities, etc., have completely been overtaken. So you have the recruitments, of course, of the faculties, etc., are such that expertise does not matter. It doesn't matter whether they have the NET. It doesn't matter whether they have the PhD. Or it doesn't even matter whether they have an MA in history. If they have a particular ideology that favors the government in power, they can be recruited. So then they are going to, even in the colleges, learn something similar, right? Um, and then when they go ahead and even if they don't, opt for history, whatever, in the colleges, when they're going to look at movies like Chava, etc., they're going to be able to relate. Oh, this is something that I did read in my textbook, which I don't remember doing in my childhood. I remember doing the exact opposite. So when I would go and watch movies which were period movies, I would say, no, this is not what we were taught in our textbook. Our textbooks had genuine, decent amount of good, doses of history, which were very different from what they were portraying in the movies. And it was a nice, contrast to see, right? It also sort of, at least for me, it made me, critically think about, okay, why was this movie portraying characters in such a manner when they were not like this, historically speaking, So the NCERT textbook, therefore, stood as this primer for me to actually gain proper historical education. But now the NCERT textbook is as good as a Chava movie. So you are going to get the same amount of doses of communalism in the NCERT textbook that you're going to get in the movie, and you are constantly being, reaffirmed this idea in your head that somehow only the Muslim rulers were bad. And even if the NCERT puts one line saying nobody today is responsible for it, I don't think that is something that is going to actually save the children from not thinking that, well, maybe today, because look at the atmosphere around you, right? The atmosphere around us is so charged with communalism. Of course, the kids are going to be influenced by this as well. And the NCERT is selling them something similar. So it is going to, sort of create this effect on their mind that this is a correct conclusion to come to, that the Mughal rulers were bad. And whatever the state is doing today, with regards to their history, or with regards to how, so many of the Muslims, etc., are being penalized, or there's so much of hatred towards the Muslims, is somehow justified because this is what the Mughal rulers did. And I think that's my biggest worry. And that's my biggest problem with the NCERT. I'm going to stop with that.
Hello, hi Ruchika.
Hi.
Uh, Myself, Dr. Idanas. May I have some few questions with you?
Sure, please. Go ahead.
I just have a small bit history known to me, not a big part of syllabus, but yeah, as you have raised the issue of present NCERT syllabus, what
Mhm.
could you what could you think will be the solution for the present generation students? Like,
Mm.
how can we overcome this dilution of what is right and what is wrong? Because they are in depth, they are drowning into this syllabus actually. This part of whole world, the syllabus is actually the whole world for them. They can't listen to particular students or particular teachers, and then they can say that yes, we can believe this teacher or that teacher. How can they decide what is the true history actually? They will believe ultimately the syllabus they are taught in their schools. So
Um,
how can we
yeah.
cope up to the solution at the end?
Correct. So that's a good question. I'm also thinking about it. But when you said how can they cope up, it reminds me of the teacher who had a profound impact on me when I was a student. She was the one who made me fall in love with history. She was my history teacher in class 8th. Fascinatingly, this is also the class 8 textbook that we're talking about. And I remember when she had her first class with us, she said, you cannot read history from just one textbook. It makes no sense. You should actually go to the library and read about history from multiple books. And she gave us a list, just like you would have a reading list in colleges, etc. And at that point in time, we were very used to reading history in a very boring, drab manner, where we would just underline everything and mug up and just regurgitate in an exam.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when she started teaching us, we were very scared and panicked that we were all going to fail because we just weren't used to it. But I remember when I started reading other textbooks, other books in the library about history, I was just amazed as to how fascinating the subject is. And I think somewhere there is where the solution lies, is to somehow encourage the students to not read history and subjects like history, the social science subjects especially, just from their textbook, is to try and encourage, and I'm hoping maybe some teachers can do that, or at least get this message across that it's very important for students to also read history from a diverse amount of sources. The more diverse that they read, the more interested they'd be. But I think that's a tall ask because students don't look at, books when they are in school as something that they must only gain education out of. Usually they look at books, especially of subjects that they're not interested in, as, okay, I have to pass this subject in an exam and then never look at it again, right? So only a student who's very interested in history would actually want to read other books on history. But I think this is one of the ways in which you could sort of look at a solution. The other, of course, is to try and make as many people aware as possible as to what is wrong with the NCERT, and hope that they would be wary of completely trusting their kid with the NCERT textbooks, and that they would also probably protest against the kind of NCERT textbooks that are coming in. So awareness, I think, is very important. That what are the problems with the NCERT textbook? And third, of course, is again, like I said, because so many institutions have fallen under the radar of the politics today, and they're so influenced by the ideology of the BJP RSS, it's very difficult to even ask that maybe the teachers could be trained differently, the school teachers. But I think even the people who are going to train the teachers are going to train them in the NCERT textbook that is given to them,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So it's a very catch-22 situation. I myself, apart from asking students to read from a diverse amount of books, different books other than just the NCERT books, and trying to raise awareness about this, I don't see what other solution could work.
Yeah, so
Hello.
this is the groundwork we
Hello.
can do actually.
Sorry, I couldn't quite catch that.
Hello. This is the groundwork that we can do actually, because
Right.
the overall political power is so powerful that we can't at a time do. It is a kind of revolution type. It needs a super full united students group, or else a teachers group, or else the public support needs to be very strong for this kind of revolution actually. Or else what we can do is do the groundwork. Yeah.
Correct.
Hello.
Hello.
May I go first?
Hello.
Yeah. Hello, Dr. Ruchika. This is Ashwin here. So I have
Hi,
two
Ashwin.
questions. Hi.
Mhm.
So I have two questions. One is, this regime constantly tries to make a differentiation between outsiders and insiders, like as if there was a boundary before, as we see it today. And generally, they talk about the what is that, the river that is there, Indus River. So between the Indus River and Kanyakumari is where the Hindustan was. But my question to you is, and they also say that nobody from India attacked outsiders. Outside, they did not go outside India and attack somewhere else. But I want to ask you, if my information is correct, Chola Raja in fact attacked Vietnam, Malaysia, and he captured territories in Malaysia, Sri Lanka, etc. So is that not an attack on the outsiders? And the second question I have is, why are they trying to hide the Kiladi facts? What is it that is coming out from the Kiladi excavations, which the present regime is not ready to accept? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Ashwin. So the outsiders, insiders, I think this has been a very long thing. I think for 10 years now, this has been their idea that somehow the Mughal rulers were outsiders and everyone else was insider. Like I said, the Aryan migration completely takes that out, which is why they are so keen on not believing the Aryan migration, whatever that means. But it's very clear that, if you look at the DNA analysis of every human being living in India right now, who, is from India, they will be having, the Aryan DNA. It will be very clear that the Central Asian steppe DNA is within their body. So everybody that way is a migrant in India. And this outsider-insider thing completely falls flat, which is why they're so keen that they constantly, even in the NCERT textbook, bring out this idea that Aryan migration is just a theory and that Aryans could have been from India, so on and so forth, although there is no evidence to the latter, to support the latter. The Cholas, of course, there is so much written by Herman Kulke, etc., on how the Cholas undertook a lot of raids in the kingdom of Sri Vijaya. There was a lot of looting, there was a lot of pillaging, there was a lot of women, horses, there was a lot of boats, etc., which were looted. There was a lot of wealth that was looted. And I think there was a series of 13 raids which were done by the Chola kings onto the kingdom of Sri Vijaya. So there was a lot of violence in those raids as well. Um, and I think Herman Kulke also makes this conclusion that because of this violence, the Chinese, because there was this trade nexus between, the Chola merchants, then you had the Sri Vijaya kingdom, and then you have the Chinese, right? Because of these raids, I think even the Chinese were not very happy with the Cholas because they thought that this was disrupting trade. So there are inscriptions to that effect as well. So you're absolutely right. I think there were a lot of the rulers who were, brutal, etc., and carried out a lot of expeditions in territories which are quote unquote outside current day India. But well, culturally, even Sri Vijaya kingdom was, part of the larger subcontinental culture. Even before the Cholas, Tamil merchants were trading with the kingdom of Sri Vijaya for a very long time. Why are they hiding the Kilari excavation? I think, firstly, of course, it sort of takes away the cake of the Vedic civilization being and the Indus civilization being the pinnacle of the civilization, and they coming from the north. I think the focus will then shift onto the south, and that is a problem that I think the current dispensation has, which is why they're very keen on hiding this fantastic excavation, which I think more and more people should be talking about it. So I think that's firstly the reason, because it will, start Indian history from a very different standpoint with a very different cultural complex. It will also, I think, lend more credence to the Aryan migration because it will make it very clear that somehow the South was firstly populated. And then, of course, you had the North being populated, starting with, the Indus Valley civilization, the Mehergarh, being the precedent of it. And then you have the Aryans coming in. So it will really then make, the Vedic civilization take a back seat, which today, the parties in power would really like to, sort of create this idea that somehow the Vedic civilization was probably the first and even better than the Indus. And this idea that even the Indus Valley civilization had Vedic elements in it and, yoga, etc., and that there was Shiva in Indus Valley, which of course is completely incorrect. There's no Shiva in Indus Valley. So all of these ideas, will have to go to the dustbin when the Kiladi excavation, I think, will come out. So I think that's the reason why that the current dispensation does not want to give a lot of limelight to the excavation, not talk about it. And also, I think
Hello.
it'll also, sorry, just give me a second. It'll also bust this entire propaganda that the ASI in cahoots with the Hindutva ideology has been having for a very long time. And I've made videos on this. This idea that somehow Mahabharat is the most ancient. And we must find Mahabharat sites. And when we find Mahabharat sites, they'll date to some fantastic year like 2700 BC or something like that, you know. And they are looking for Mahabharat sites everywhere. You know, they are evicting a village in Haryana called Thepola right now, thinking that there is a Mahabharat site underneath that. So I think that is again something that will take a backseat, because, well, everybody knows Mahabharat sites are not going to be found because Mahabharat is an epic. There's not a lot of history associated with the Mahabharata. There's social history, of course, because it's a fiction. So I think all fictional books are very good sources of social history. But of course, you know, literally taking it to be that this war would have happened and that's how Indraprastha would have looked like, that is not going to yield any evidence ever, and has never actually yielded evidence. Yes, who wants
And
to go
talking about
next?
brutality, I think even the
Please,
Vijayanagar Empire, whenever the kings used to die, they used to kill all the females in the courtyard. This is what I've heard. And have the history textbooks mentioned
uh,
this? So, thank you.
we have
Um,
quite a long list of questions, so please keep
No, no.
it short.
Hello.
Hello.
Uh,
Yeah. Shall I ask?
I
Because I'm
will call,
waiting for
name.
on.
um,
I will call your name.
Abdullah, it'll be better if you could just pick out and,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, ask them. Yes.
No, no. I
yeah,
have a question on jizya.
yeah, yeah, sir. I will call your name first. We have quite a few long lists who have raised their hand.
No,
So,
no. I have
Hasib,
raised
you
the
could
hand first.
go on.
I'll quickly finish up if you allow me.
Okay, sir. Okay, please.
Yeah. Hi, Ruchika ma'am. How are you? This is Shivram from Pune. I have a basic question on the jizya. The jizya is mentioned in the Quran, chapter number 9. So
Hmm.
jizya is not something like that added later on. It was added during the Prophet, peace be upon him's reign, and it clearly shows it has to be imposed on the people of the book. So it's a religious tax which discriminate the religion. There is a discrimination between the people where those who are non-Muslims, the jizya has to be imposed. Even Mr. Irfan Habib has criticized that in his the book Agrarian System, Mughal India. That is one. Uh, so discriminating by the religion, by the birth, has not seen much in other reigns like Mughals or the Muslims. So what is your thought on that?
Okay, firstly, I'm going to try and wrap my head around what you just said. Firstly, you said that the jizya is talked about in the Quran. Yes, 100%. But does the Quran say that it is an incentive to convert? No, that is an interpretation which is an incorrect interpretation. Secondly, you say that the jizya was imposed on the non-Muslim. Yes, everybody agrees on that. In fact, which is why Akbar removed it and it stayed repealed till Shah Jahan's reign because it's a discriminatory tax. Akbar very clearly spells it out as a discriminatory tax. He also removes the Hajj tax because he thinks even that is discriminatory because only Muslims have to pay that tax. Right? So there is no doubt about the fact that these are discriminatory tax. Your question then says that were there other if I'm getting your question right, were there discriminatory taxes in other rulers' reigns? Absolutely yes, and I can give you examples. For example, the Vijayanagar kings would levy heavy taxes on temples. Two taxes come to mind. One is Jodi and one is Sulavari, that only temples had to pay because temples at that point of time were also economic institutions. They were not just institutions where people would go and pray. These were institutions which would hold weekly hats where people would come, bring their wares. There would be markets, right? And a portion of that would go to the temple. The temple was also a consumer in the trade. The temple was also a producer in the trade. The temple would have its own factories wherein oil was produced, ghee was produced, clothes were produced, right? Silk was produced, so on and so
Right.
forth.
Yes, yes.
And they would participate in it. So all of this was taxed by the Vijayanagar. In fact, the Vijayanagar kingdom was notorious for actually heavily taxing the temples because the temples were so rich and they were part of the trade. So that is also a discriminatory tax because that is
No,
not
no, 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 no,
applicable
no,
on
no, no, no. It's
others,
a wrong
right?
interpretation here. Let me
Uh,
stop you. Let me
Uh,
stop you. Just a minute.
can I
Just a minute.
can I just
sir,
finish my answer?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Please, 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 please.
Can I just finish my answer, right? So this is also a discriminatory tax. We find, in fact, actually similar examples of, for example, during the Sultan's time, so many of the Brahmins were exempt from paying jizya. That's another discrimination. In fact, mostly the Brahmins would not pay jizya. That was something, a privilege which was given so that the sultans and the people who were at the upper caste of the creme de la creme of the caste society, quote unquote, could stay, in harmony with each other. So the Brahmins were exempt from paying jizya so many times. At the same point of time, you would have other discriminatory taxes, such as taxes which are only levied on the merchants because they were earning so much from the trade. So if you think that there were discriminatory taxes only levied by the sultans and the Mughal rulers, that's incorrect. There is a host of discriminatory taxes that were being levied by so many other rulers. And also, jizya was not payable by everyone. Brahmins were exempt from paying jizya.
Hello, Ruchika. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, I can
Hi,
hear
my
you.
name is Hasib. I'm from Boston, USA.
Hi,
Like
Hasib.
you, hi. I also have background in partition as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
and my family actually is from Bengal, was from
Mm-hmm.
Bengal.
Mm-hmm.
And one poem you mentioned, Koka Ghumalo Para Juralo.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up with that poem. So it's
Mm.
more like Koka Ghumalo Para Juralo Borgielo Deshe, বুলবুলিতে ধান খেয়েছে খাজনা দিব কিসে
Khajna depo kishe.
ধান ফুরালো পান ফুরালো খাজনার উপায় কি আর কটা দিন সবুর করো রসুন বুনেছি that means they took
Mm.
our rice, they took our pan,
Mm.
just
Mm.
wait, we actually have garlic and we can pay with garlics.
How fascinating.
Yeah. So, my question, actually, before I go to my question, I have actually piggyback what you said, right,
Mm.
about the conversion
Mm.
into Islam. So you
Mm.
mentioned the Sufism. One other
Mm.
thing I want to add with it, uh, in Bengal, they have a huge problem with caste system. The four system,
Mm.
like caste system, like Brahman, Kshatriya,
Mm.
Vaishya, and Sudra. They had
Mm.
a category called Namasudra who were
Right.
exempt for owning any properties, no
Mm.
human rights whatsoever. And they were the mass follower of Muslims. They were converted into Islam,
Right.
because Islam permitted them to own properties, to live
Mm-hmm.
as a human life. They can have marriage freedom, and
Mm-hmm.
women do not have to accept widowhood. If any woman,
Mm.
Muslim woman's husband died, they are permitted to remarry. So in
Right.
Bengal, because of the caste system, let's say a girl is 6 years old, got married with 60-year-old man, and rest of her life, if her husband died, uh, she has to accept widowhood. But if she converted into Muslim or become a Muslim wife, she didn't have to follow that. So that was another sides where people were hugely converted into Muslims, not because of jizya taxes, right? So that is like what I wanted to say. However, the question I want to say, the textbook and the changes happen in the textbook, that is actually a floodgate that we saw. Like I said, you also understand about the coming from a family where partition happened. That happened when partition was like uprise right after Second World War, right? Both sides, Hindus and Muslims, they have propagandas like that from for each other, where they wanted their separate nations. And a lot of people like you who actually wanted to know the truth, so you are digging up, or people who actually came here, they wanted to know the truth, so they were like participating in a group session like this. But a lot of normal people, they don't care. They will believe what's shown in Java, they will believe what is going on in WhatsApp, or like what propaganda they're seeing in news channels. Like, I think you went to one of the news channel like Aaj Tak with
Yeah.
Anjana Tripathi, or like whatever their name is. So they will believe what they're saying, not like,
Right.
reading a book or going to a library. So that is a floodgate. You live in Mehroli, I think, right, in Delhi, which is also the capital of Mughal Empire. So you also see the changes since 2014. My question to you, what you are doing as an Indian or what you are doing as a teacher to stop the floodgate, or what people like you, what Indian people like you are doing to stop the floodgate where hatred and fake nationalism and fake religion uh, followers like Hindutva or the concepts are, RSS concepts are, not spreading to us to a level where people forget that they are human first, then they are Indian, then they're following a religion, right? So
Um,
what are the steps you are taking?
Right. So my steps have been twofold. One is, of course, I have a YouTube channel where I try and, quote unquote, bust myths, which are very popular in the Indian society today. Most of these are very communal myths, which talk about, how, say, the Mughals, like I said, what NCERT is also referring to right now, that the Mughals were brutal, the Mughals were cruel, they were, they were the only ones who destroyed temples, this, that, and the other. So I've been doing a lot of that on my channel. The channel is called Dr. Ruchika Sharma Official for anybody who's interested.
I'm
The
also a
other, of
follower of
course,
eyeshadow and history.
yeah. It was earlier called Eyeshadow and Itihas, but I think I've sort of just clubbed all of it together and called it Dr.
Okay.
Ruchika Sharma Official. So anybody who's sort of interested can go and check that out. And also, I think just generally raising awareness. This is why I also go on news channels, which are, of course, rabidly, pro-Hindutva, and they just the level of debate is not very nice. But I think the reach of these channels is huge. They reach to a large audience, and even if I can speak facts for 5 minutes, I think it'll be very interesting to see how many people it reaches to and if it could make a change, right? So I think therefore for me it's twofold. One is to raise awareness, and the other is to talk about and try and bring in as much academic history as possible through forums like YouTube, Instagram, social media, Facebook, and of course these news channels.
I have one last question to you personally. Is that
Brother
okay to
Hachi,
contact you?
please cut it short, like question should
Oh,
be,
sure,
because there are
definitely.
many. Yeah, sure.
Just one question to Ruchika personally. Is that okay to contact you via Instagram?
Sure, you can send me a DM.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I would like to ask Dr. Parth to unmute himself and speak. Oh,
Hello.
Hi.
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Okay, I can
Ma'am, your
only.
Insta ID, please. Can we get
I
your Insta?
think Dr. Parth is not online. So I would like
Oh,
next content like
Hello.
Shahzad
Hello.
Ahmad. Yeah, Dr. Parth, please.
Now am I audible, please? Am I
Yes,
audible?
yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Ruchika, one of the participants, in fact, two of the participants, they raised a caution that how it is possible to uh, influence the younger generation or the students which are actually reading those textbooks.
Oh, I think Dr. Path got cut
Yeah.
again.
Yes, ma'am. I think it's network is not clear, I
Um,
guess. Next we
Dr.
will go to the
Roshan, if
next.
I could,
It is okay
if I
now.
could,
Just,
yeah.
just, just for 1 second. Dr. Ruchika,
If Dr. Path, if it suits you, you could just put your question on the chat.
Yes, ma'am, you are able to say something. Sorry. Like you
Yeah,
are
I
going
was
to.
just saying that somebody had asked me my Insta ID. It's Ruchika Sharma 23. And the best way to reach to me is to send me an email at eyeshadowitihas@gmail.com. EYESHADOWETIHAS@gmail.com. Right? Okay.
Okay,
Shehzad,
ma'am.
you can ask your
Yeah.
question.
Can I ask my question?
Yeah.
Ma'am, my question is direct. How do we distinguish between historical revisionism and historical correction?
Hmm. So that's a very interesting question. I think firstly, if you look at the way Indian historiography has been written, so we first had, colonial historiography, which was very bad, and I've spoken about it in the lecture as well today. And it was all about tropes of, dividing everything into Hindu and Muslim, etc. And then you had this nationalist historiography, right? Which was basically a kind of historical correction where they talk about, we have had our history looked at by the English in a very terrible manner, wherein, we were sort of subservient to everything which is Greco-Roman, and Greco-Roman is always better. The Greek art is somehow better than Indian art, so on and so forth. So there was this deliberate creation of the greats of Indian history. So you had, Ashoka being held as the great, Akbar being held as the great, a lot of exaggeration of what good Indian history was all about. Indian architecture was so good, Indian art was so good. So that's nationalist historiography, which really helped India as a nation to form itself. That I think was historical correction. Now, when you come to historical revisionism, which is from the 1970s onwards, now that is a very good movement in academic research, which basically, looked at both the colonial historiography and tried to remove that particular aspect as well as nationalist historiography. So if colonial historiography was one extreme wherein India was, the entire history of India was just these two races, Hindus and Muslims fighting. Nationalist historiography was that everything was amazing and, we had such an amazing history. Historical revisionism tried to, sort of debunk both and come out with, social histories and caste realities and, histories of women and where are basically the women and why are they absent in Indian history and what can, their silences mean, right? And also, the histories of kings, etc., taxation, looking at it from a Marxist perspective. For example, Irfan Habib talks about how high the Mughal taxation was, 40%, so on and so forth. And, then looking at art, as a evolutionary process and just not as, oh my God, how amazing this art is. And looking at architecture as, a blend of different forms of architecture and not just, oh, how amazing Indian architecture is. So I think historical revisionism, therefore, actually has given us the best academic research that we have had so far. What is being done today is not revisionism at all, is not even correction at all. It's basically creating a deliberate creation of a narrative of history, which is not based on facts, which is not based on any modicum of any kind of objectivity, and which is not written by historians who are qualified in this. If you look at, for example, the quote unquote the right wing in the past 75 years of Indian independence, nobody from the right wing scholar has ever been able to actually produce a good paper, peer reviewed paper. Never. There has never been a good RW scholar of Indian history. Right? Simply because, they are not looking at history the way history should be looked at through proper historical methodologies. They have these preconceived notions where they'll say, Are sati is a Western construct and caste is a Western construct. Well, if it is, why don't you write a paper about it? But they know they can't because these are all, myths and beliefs up in the air that are very nice to say because it, creates a belief in people who want to believe in these ideas, but there is no history in it, right? So I wouldn't call this either revisionism or correction. It is neither. It is just basically ideology masquerading as history.
Thank you, ma'am. We will take 2, 3 questions together, and then you can answer them at once, and
Yeah.
then we will conclude the session.
I think
Uh,
I think that will be better.
yeah.
Just continue
Zamir,
from previous question. Just don't
Yeah.
forget. Yeah, how
Yeah.
can we say that what is the proper method of learning the history? Like previously, I have seen one video from Dr. Ram Punyani sir in Kunal Kamra show, in which he says that why Aurangzeb has destroyed the temples and there was immoral activities in some temple. His all that and all. Then one of in Op India article where RSS described it as a tale story or it's not a proper documented story and all. In many history we which right wing portrays or which they don't have proper documents. In
Hmm.
modern history we say that we have proper documents and all. In medieval
Hmm.
history the courtroom collections which we have. Then what will be the for the ancient history or for the modern history, what will be the source of proper source for learning the history?
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, you
I'm
can
going to
also.
take, yeah, I'm going to take two more questions and then answer all of these together.
Sure, ma'am.
Hi, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Hello.
So
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah. Hello.
uh, Tariq,
Yeah.
please
You have
mute
explained.
yourself. Israr, you can go on.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Israr from Tamil Nadu. I have an
Hi,
interesting
Israr.
question. Yeah, I have an interesting question for you. Since each state has its own unique culture and historical context, why can't state governments be given more power to design their own syllabi and submit to them the NCERT for consideration? Wouldn't this reduce the kind of central interference we see in distortion of history? For example, Tamil Nadu has long resisted using NCERT book, choosing instead of teach Dravidian culture, anti-caste movement through its own syllabus. Do you think this decentralized model could help counter the homogenization of history we are seeing today?
Okay.
Yeah. May I?
Yeah, Tariq. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you. So, I honestly,
No, I can't hear nobody.
for that. Hello. Secondly,
Yeah.
you
Dr.
have
Parth,
proposed.
Dr. Parth, I am not able to, I think nobody is able to hear you. Your voice is coming and going. If you could put your question on the chat, then I'll be able to take it.
Yeah. Hello. This is Tariq. May I put my question? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
Thank
Tariq,
you.
please
go ahead.
go on.
Yeah. Yeah. You have analyzed the current situation, this problem. Then you have proposed a solution for that, to go through different books of histories and all.
Mm-hmm.
That's the not that is not for the common layman or the general people.
Mm-hmm.
I wanna request people like you along with some of historians who are not biased to the ideology. If you could write a book
Yeah.
focused mainly to address or to counter the current issue,
Hmm.
from the ancient history to the medieval history to the modern history, covering in a simple book that can be a bestseller kind of book, covering the technicalities and logics, but the language should be a simple that everyone can understand. So that can also be a solution. So we can further go on making the documentaries based on that book. We can use that book as a reference book, and we can also use that for social programs and events. But we
Right.
require that kind of stuff, all the things in one book, just to counter current situation.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I answer now, Abdullah, all these three?
Yes, ma'am. Now you can answer. Yeah.
I'm going to start with the first one. What is the proper method of learning history? Learn it from the historians, people who have qualified in history, who have degrees in history, who've written about history, who have papers written on history, who have books written on history. Learn history from historians. Even till date in India, all the people who have qualification in history are actually very good historians, right? Who have qualifications in history, who've written about history, who've written books on history. They are very good. If you read Kunal Chakrabarti, if you read Kumkum Roy, if you read Supriya Verma, if you read Jaya Menon, Najaf Haider, they're all amazing, fantastic historians, right? So the best way of learning history is to read history from historians. Okay. Then this very good idea that somebody had suggested, that why don't we have regional, state boards, etc., giving inputs to the NCERT to include in their book, that will reduce the power that the center has on it. I agree. That sounds like a very good plan, but there are problems with that as well. For example, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, the Rajasthan State Board textbook said that the Battle of Haldi Ghati was won by Maharana Pratap and not by Akbar. So they blatantly lied, right? And that is because it suited their state's ideology, the political party in power at that point in time, it really suited them, right? So I would think that if a particular institution has to be influenced by ideology of the state, then it doesn't matter whether it is at the center or whether it is at the state level. They're all going to be influenced by it. Although I take your larger point, and I agree, my problem with all NCERT textbooks, not just this one, but even before, has been that there is a unnatural, unnatural emphasis on northern history more than, history of other parts of India. Right? As a student, didn't learn much about the history of the Northeast. I, as a student, didn't learn much about the history of the South. So there is clearly a bias, a slight tilt towards the North, right? And I think I completely agree with that. But I think if the problem is that there is an influence of the state that the government, that the NCERT is working under, well, then I think even the state boards are working under the state government's influence, right? So I think that influence is always going to be there. We have to really create a very autonomous institution, although the NCERT says it's an autonomous body, but well, I think it's very clear it's not the case. We have to create an autonomous institution which is very free from state influence. Only then can we actually have good textbooks produced for the students to learn something. For the person who had suggested that I write a popular book, well, I'd be happy to, except I think my point still stays. The point is to read books, right? The point is to not read WhatsApp forwards. And that's the way to know good history, So I'd be happy to write a book, and I'm working on a few of those, but that's in the offing. But what is more important is to read. I think there is no other way to know more about history than to read history, right? It's good, and I encourage people to also watch, people who talk about history, historians who talk about history, etc. That's also great. Visual medium has its own plus. Visual medium stays with you, good graphics, etc. can have a very good impact, and it can really make history interesting, because usually it's considered as a boring subject. All of that is great, but there is no substitute for reading books. So yes, your suggestion is great, that I write a popular book, and I'm taking that suggestion into account. But I think the point still stays that at the end of the day, it'll only help if you read.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. We know Dr. Ruchika's talk are very engaging. All of you want to ask more and more questions, but we have time limit. We are sorry if we are not able to accommodate more questions at the moment.
Can I, Abdullah, can I just take 2 minutes and answer Dr. Parth? He was trying really hard to speak to us. He's
Sure,
written
ma'am,
his
sure.
question in the chat.
Yeah.
He says, I'm from Ajmer, Rajasthan. I didn't have a question but wanted to convey to the listeners pertaining to the solution. When I end my lecture on psychiatry, I made a point that I bust one historical myth a day and start a discussion. So we all need to include discussion about history as a scientific discourse, and encourage students to study history as a means to increase their fund of knowledge, rather than thinking history as a subject that teaches no real skills. We need to make discourse about history popular. Thanks, Dr. Path, and I agree with that. This idea that somehow history is not important is a very ahistorical idea. I think history is very important, and people should be more and more aware about their history, because the states, are very fond of and find it very conducive to mess with history and change history according to what suits their ideology. In fact, even before the current revision, it is a very regular feature of NCERT textbooks. Every time there is a regime change at the center, there'll be some change in the NCERT history textbooks. That's the only textbook that always, would undergo some revision or the other. So I think it's very interesting that to note that history is, one of the first things that is attacked by the state, that is changed, that is modified, that is obliterated, so that people can be controlled. One of the easiest way to control people is to control their history. So I think it's very important for people to know about their history.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. I would like Dr. Roshan to please conclude this session. Director CERT.
Okay, thank you. Uh, uh, First of all, I would like to thank our esteemed speaker today's session, Dr. Ruchika Sharma, who is vocal against these like uh, the changes which NCERT is doing and claiming it as the historical revision. So, ma'am, thank you for accepting our invitation on the first note and delivering a superb lecture here so that many our audience who are PhD scholars as well as studying masters in history in different universities have got enlightened by your talk. First of all, thank you, ma'am. Thanks again, once again, for coming to this section and accepting our invitation. And secondly,
Thank
I would
you.
like to keep, on behalf of CERT, I would like to thank all the audience, who are part of this session, staying and listening to this engaging talk on the changes in its NCERT. So, ma'am, as before, like our AI has stated, like CERT is working on this regional historiography before. So we had worked on North India as well as Central India as well as South Indian historiography in different conferences. Like we had kept regional conferences at different centers in these three places. As well as recently we had a session on Northeast History Summit to trace out the regional historiography in North India, and particularly Meghalaya. So, like our future plan is to keep on a seminar or symposium regarding the NCERT revisions of history in particular. So, we would like to take your help in those regards so that we can collaborate and work together in future too.
Sure, I'd be happy to help. Just let me know how.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks once again. I would like to thank again for your valuable time and valuable discussion. And thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
The session ends here. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan. And thank you to everybody who came and attended the talk. Thank you so much. The
Thanks,
questions were
Ruchika.
very interesting.
How can we connect with you?
I'm going to leave my email ID in the chat. All right.
Yeah, please.